In this lesson, we'll learn how to use Illustrator's rulers to help position our artwork. Alright, so in the previous lesson we learned about using templates in Illustrator. Now I've still got one of those templates on screen here to show you in this next lesson, but I want to talk to you for a minute about positioning our artwork. Now remember, Illustrator is a program that uses a series of mathematical equations to both create and position artwork within the document. This basically, in turn, makes precision a very important aspect of Adobe Illustrator. So one of the tools that Illustrator comes equipped with to help you with precisely positioning your artwork is going to be the rulers. Now, if we want to go ahead and turn on the rulers for this document, we can do that by coming up here to our View drop-down menu and choosing Rulers, and then Show Rulers. Now this is another keyboard shortcut that I would recommend you learn. It's Control R just to simply turn those on. So I'm just going to go ahead and use that keyboard shortcut, and let's turn on the rulers for this document. Now notice here, in doing that, I have a ruler up above our document and then another ruler over to the left side of our document. Now let's take a look at this here. We've got a 10 over here, and we've got our 0 is right around in here. Now notice that these are actually set to inches. Now remember, when we created a new document, let me go ahead and do a Control N for you. We can actually come in here and set the unit of measure right here. And we can change that from points to picas, inches, millimeters, centimeters, or pixels here. Now depending on what we select here as our unit of measure is going to actually change what the rulers look like in our document. Now if we decide after we've already created our document that we want to change the unit of measure for that, it's just as easy as coming up to your rulers and right-clicking on those, and we can come over here and switch it, say, to picas. And you can see here that the ruler will adjust accordingly. Let me go and switch that back to inches here. Now this will change the unit of measure for this document and this document only. I want to show you another place where we can actually change the default unit of measure in Illustrator. I want to come up here to my Edit menu and go to Preferences. And I'm going to come down here and choose Units. Now notice here in this dialog that comes up, we have three different settings here. One for General, one for Stroke, and one for Type. Now notice here that under General, the default is set to inches. If we want to change the default general unit of measure for Illustrator, we can go ahead and change that here. And Illustrator will try and create all of its new documents using this new default general unit of measure. I'm going to go ahead and close this window out now. Now, there's really two different modes that our rulers can operate in, and right now we're using one of those modes, and it's known as what's called artboard rulers. Now, the reason that these are called artboard rulers is because the origin of these rulers is actually dependent on which artboard we have selected. Notice here that I've got this business card selected currently. We can look at that over in my artboard panel. You can see that that one's selected in orange here. And there's actually a thicker black outline around that if you look closely. Now, notice here that with that artboard selected, my 0, 0 on my rulers is right in this top left corner right here. I want to come over here and click on the letterhead artboard. And notice that my rulers adjust. Let me go ahead and just zoom in on that artboard here. So you can see here that the rulers, the artboard dependent rulers, actually change depending on which artboard we have selected. So this is going to allow for you to build artwork independently on each of these artboards and really use the rulers based on whichever artboard you're working on at the time. Now there is another mode for these rulers. Let me come over here. If you wanted for these rulers to be static and have one set origin for the rulers, and then we can come up here and we can switch these rulers to what's known as global rulers. Let me just come up here to View and go to Rulers, and you can see here there's an option for Change to Global Rulers. Now we can also get to that option if we right click on the rulers themselves. You can see it's right here at the bottom. Let's go ahead and change these to global rulers. And notice here that my origin for the two rulers, the 0, 0 point, is set in the top left hand corner of my first artboard. I'm going to come over here and click on, say, the envelope. Notice that the rulers don't change at all. Nothing happens. The origin of our ruler stays put right there on that first artboard. Now, there is a way to change the origin of your rulers, and that's just simply to click over here in this top left-hand corner where the two rulers meet, and we just drag the origin out. And you can tell you've got a hold of the origin when you have that little dotted line both vertically and horizontally, and wherever you release that origin is going to be where the new 0 point on your document is. So I'm going to go ahead and release that right about there, and you can see here that my 0 point changes. Now, it might actually help you to think about this origin for our rulers in terms of an x-axis and a y-axis, if you're familiar with those. All of the objects that we bring into our document here are going to be plotted and placed based on that origin. So again, I just changed the origin for my rulers. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the corner here just to set those back to its default location. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over here to my artboard rulers again. Alright, so let's for just a moment talk about how Illustrator uses these rulers to place every object here on our artboard. So I'm going to go ahead and come into my window menu right now. I'm going to open up my transform panel right here. And there we go. Now, if you remember a couple lessons back when we were looking at the artboard options, we sort of skimmed past an icon that looks something like this, and it's called the reference point. Now, let's talk about objects that we bring into our artboards here. I'm going to go ahead and select this logo right here. Now notice in selecting this transform panel suddenly comes alive. We now have an X and Y coordinates as well as some dimensions here based on the size of that object. And again, our reference point is set where there's a little black square in the top left-hand corner. Now that is actually the location where Illustrator is reading that in regards to placement on our artboard. So it's telling us that this top left-hand corner of this grouped object is set at this X value and this Y value. So by default, Illustrator sets that reference point in the top left corner for objects. So let me go ahead and just change that to the center, and I want you to watch and see how the X and Y coordinates change. Alright, see, we now have a new X coordinate and a new Y coordinate based on this new reference point. Let me go ahead and change that back here. Now, remember, we have set our rulers to artboard rulers, so the rulers are going to change depending on the artboard we have selected. So let's come over here and work on the envelope for just a moment. We'll select this logo here, and again we've got our coordinates on the x-axis and the y-axis. Now let's go ahead and change these back over to global rulers. Now notice that the values in those changed quite a bit because we changed the origin of our rulers. Our 0, 0 is no longer in the top left-hand corner of this artboard. It's now over here in the top left-hand corner of this artboard. So this object is being measured based on this new origin. Now, depending on what you're working on, you know, whichever ruler mode is better for you is ultimately up to you. I can tell you that personally, when I'm working with rulers, I usually keep my rulers set to artboard rulers, so the origin of the rulers changes based on the artboard that I have selected. So, hopefully, by watching this lesson, you can see how we can be assisted in placing our objects on our artboard and moving those around by the rulers available to us here in Illustrator. In the next lesson, we're going to continue on and look at another valuable tool to help us precisely place objects on our artboards, and these are called guides.